you kind of answered partially my next question, which was about community college,
Yeah.
because the Whitmer administration would like to see free community college for all Michigan residents. Um, so how does that impact the entire state as well? I mean, in terms of not just the student themselves, but people who would be perhaps naysayers to this program and say it's socialism. How would you explain to them that really this is actually helpful to everybody if we have more educated folks in our state?
I would love to argue with someone about why people shouldn't be educated in Michigan and shouldn't have the barriers to education removed. And tuition, let's start about the $4,000 or so, $5,000. That is the difference between some people going to community college and some people not going to community college. So that's why the governor and I have presented this Michigan guarantee that if you're a family in Michigan, when your kid is 4 years old, they're going to be able to go to preschool for free to be positioned to be an early reader. And when your kid finishes high school, they're going to be able to go to community college and get an associate's degree, tuition free, that puts them on a pathway to an amazing career. They want to continue on to a 4-year college, they'll be 2 years ahead of schedule to be able to do that and be able to save money and not get these crushing student loans that so many people still have. Because they had to spend all this money to go to 4-year college. So really what this does is positions people to be able to start their career sooner, to go farther in their career faster, to make more money, to be able to support a family so they can buy a home and reinvest in a community. This also is important because the employers who have these jobs that are open and available right now, they need people with skills and credentials. And one of the best ways to show that you have a skill is by getting a certification, by taking professional training, or by getting a degree. And so we think this program really lays a foundation. And now to expand it to be available to every single person who graduates from high school, I think it's a step in the right direction for our state, for our education system, and for our economy.
Nice. As far as speaking of college, I understand that you have a little different background as a politician. You are a computer science engineer.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Yeah.
And you worked for Microsoft.
I did.
Right? So how does that, I mean, that's a little different. Most people you think of as lawyers or, businessmen who are in politics. So how does that background help you in your job, in your role?
Sure. Well, engineering is just problem solving and making systems work better for people. And ultimately, as a public servant, my job is to make systems work better for people in Michigan. And so when we have a challenge in public policy, whether that is our, for example, our juvenile justice system that has failed so many families across the Upper Peninsula because there either weren't enough services available for kids who needed a little help or needed a hand up or needed to have a program or something to support them or needed mental health resources. But since those weren't available, maybe the kid got in trouble. And so then they were put into jail or to juvenile detention, which didn't really help them get better and help them improve. And so I was able to work with the legislature to sign a bipartisan package of bills last year to reform that system, to better fund it and support it, to better support service providers in the community. And that's because I took a look at that problem. We formed a task force that had bipartisan members of the legislature, service providers from all over the state, judges, lawyers, and most importantly, people directly impacted by the system, and took in their input and took in their feedback. And then we designed policy solutions that work. It's taking a big, complicated problem like juvenile justice and breaking it down into the components that we can solve. And that's what I learned how to do as an engineer. And so I do that every single day now as Lieutenant Governor.
Oh, what can you tell me about the caretaker tax credit?
Yeah, so Governor Whitmer and I introduced this caregiver tax credit first in the State of the State address and then talked about it more when we presented our budget recommendation last week. Look, almost every household in Michigan has someone who has caregiver responsibilities. You're taking care of a loved one who may live with you or may live in another place, but they need some help. They're aging, they may be sick, there may be a kid who has extraordinary needs. And being a caregiver is really hard, right? Like it's very difficult physically a lot of times. There's a lot of stuff you have to do to take a person here and there. If they need their physical help, you got to physically be able to handle that. It can be very emotionally draining, especially for those who are caring for our elders or to have a parent, for example, like my parents would take care of my grandpa and sort of watch him sort of begin to honestly decline physically and mentally. It's difficult to watch, but it's also really expensive to be a caregiver. And so this caregiver tax credit says we recognize how burdensome it is to pay for these transportation costs, to pay for these nursing expenses, to pay for this medicine that's not for you, it's for the person you're caring for.
Right.
So we're going to do this caregiver tax credit of up to $5,000. It's going to offset a lot of those costs for a lot of people. And we think this will at least help lighten the load financially of the responsibilities that it takes to be a caregiver. And I think it's just a recognition that being a caregiver is something a lot of people do, that it's very difficult, and that it's really important, and that your state should support you in that effort.